Good evening, elected members, members of staff, members of the public. Thank you for joining us at this agenda briefing. For those who haven't joined us in an agenda briefing before, this is an informal meeting, an opportunity for elected members to go through the council papers for next week and ask our staff any questions to clarify before debating and voting next week. As you can probably tell, we do have a number of apologies around the room. Councillor Quain is on leave, Councillor Ramesh is on leave, and I've had apologies from Councillor Brown and Councillor Kozisek. A number of directors are away, including our CEO, but we have acting CEO beside me here, and the other directors are also on leave, but we have a number of very capable managers filling their spots. So when we get to the questions, I'm sure they will happily answer if we can, but bear in mind with us elected members, some things may need to be taken on notice if required, but we'll work our way through that. Are there any declarations of interest for tonight's meeting? Councillor? You probably just have to note it again. It was just an impartial interest, wasn't it, Councillor Turner? So Councillor Turner has an impartial interest on the confidential item, item 15, which she can draft up for us, but we'll be in the room for that meeting. When we get to that item, and I've spoken to the deputation as well, it is a confidential item, so we will be moving behind closed doors, but after some advice and conversation, we are going to have the deputising group here make deputations, and the opportunity to do that will be given later on this evening. So when we get to that point, we'll call you up. Working our way through the agenda. Item 10.1.1, which we have a bunch of policies here, councillors, through our policy committee. Any questions on this?
Yes, please.
Councillor Steck.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just in relation to CBD policy, there was 8.1A, which was not attached to the agenda. So can we have that for next round? And when I read it, I guess it says no change, but then it goes back to 10.11. So I'll wait to rephrase my question at 10.11.
So you said there was an attachment of 8.1, Councillor Steck?
Yeah, and then it goes on to
10.11
talk
is
about
it?
CBD districts, and the CBD district does not include Kumbana Bay, Dolphin Discovery Centre, Marsden Hill, Bunbury East, East Bunbury. So they're part of that policy, and it's. I was just wondering why there says no change, and whether or not we should expand the CBD street activity policy to include those areas. And I was just going to wonder whether or not there is mood to actually do that so that it conforms with the policy.
Yeah, sure. So I think just in reference to the 8.1, Councillor Steck, the acting CEO has just informed me the 8.1 was referring back to the council minutes, sorry, not the council minutes, the committee minutes, when this item went to the committee. So that's what the 8.1 was referring to. 10.1.1 is obviously the attachment to this, and I guess your question was around, the CBD activity and whether or not that includes some of those other places you mentioned. I do note that looks like this committee recommendation was to request the CEO to hold a workshop to discuss some of those policies, but I'll ask the CEO if you wanted to make any other comment on that.
Mr Mayor, no, not at this point in time.
No. Sure, we can have a look into other point, Councillor Steck, that you've made, but obviously can raise that next week as well. Otherwise, it sounds like we're going to have an opportunity to have that conversation as well around that policy as a whole. Councillor Steele?
I'll make a comment because I am on that policy. Yep. That was the reason why, so then other councillors could be involved and put their input into it. So that's why number 2 there.
And just a further question, sir, on part of that was also for a maximum of a 3-hour period, and I wondered what the science was behind that, because 3 hours seemed a little bit short. But again, I accept that councillors can have opportunity to comment.
From the sounds of it, Councillor Steck, that's what it is, that we obviously want to have this as the elected member group. I'm wondering where 3 months come from. That sounds like a pretty long time, so whether or not there was any rationale for 3 months for the workshop. Acting CEO, you probably can't answer that one just now, but maybe from the anyone who was active in that policy committee as well.
I actually think it was so in line for when we go back to the next policy review as well, so we could do it before then, if that's my...
Sure.
No one else, no.
We can get some clarity on that as well, sure. But it looks like we can discuss a number of those concerns, Councillor Steck, before that reappearing on the policy committee. Thank you. 10.1.2, records management policy. Any questions? Thank you. 10.1.3 has some very minor adjustments to names. Any questions? Thank you. 10.1.4. Thank you. 10.1.5. Thank you. 10.3.1, any questions on the schedule of accounts paid? Councillor Steck?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can you just bear with me for a tad?
Absolutely.
Thank you. A bit handicapped.
Yep.
A couple of questions that just relate to, I think I counted 17, yes, thank you, 17 new pre-employment medicals. I was just wondering whether or not that is in line with our adopted workforce plan.
I could ask the acting CEO to have a go at that, but it
And
might
a further
take
question,
on us.
I'm guessing that's probably lost employees as probably filling those spaces, is that correct? From
Acting
pe-
CEO, do you want to have a go
employees
at that?
leaving?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'll try and answer this best I can. Yes, we are doing a lot of recruitment at the moment. Not that we had a lot of turnover. We've had quite considerable vacancies for some time. Yes, those medicals would be within the FTE that we currently had under budget.
Further?
Councillor Steck, yep.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just there's the road closure for the payment for the Dolphin Discovery Centre. It was over 5,500. How is that revenue calculated for per the whole day? Can I have that on email, sir?
Yeah, sure. I understand there was a bit of a conversation with the CEO on that, but I know certainly the CEO would be aware of it, acting CEO. I'm not sure if you work around that, but I'm sure the CEO will provide a briefing note on there. I know there was discussions around different communications, so we can get that in writing to you, Councillor Steck.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr Mayor, further question, if I may. Invoice 2084, legal fees for $85,754. Could I have that on email? What was that for? Because I really don't know what that's for.
Acting CEO, happy to take that one on notice. Thank you.
Further final question, I guess, Mr Mayor. Actually, two. There's fridge freezers and so on that went to Haynes Oval, and it came up to nearly $4,000. Not that I disagree with that, but have we got funds for other sporting facilities who require the same?
What item was this, or invoice number, Councillor Steck?
There's a couple. There's invoice 63526037, and there's another one further on that I've read. So I can supply those, sir.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I've got one in front of me. I'm assuming it's to do with the pre-season game.
Both.
And a number of those, how do I answer this correctly? Obviously, we've been giving funding allowance for the pre-season game through the AFL and some funding allowance from the state government to run these games. So how that all comes into act at the end of it will be a remittance process. Clearly, we're going to have more expenditure in the first year than we are in future years, but I can get the CEO to provide some feedback on where that currently is,
Yeah.
what that is. Yeah.
And the question was really around, procurement for other sporting organisations around the community. And then the other thing seems trivial, but there was over nearly 6,000 from Coca-Cola, and I'm assuming that, we probably could get things cheaper from Coles or Woolies if it's just cans of cool drink. I mean, it's trivial in the sense of 72 million, but every dollar counts.
Sure, and that was that in relation to the Southwest Sports Centre supplies?
Yes, sir.
Taken on notice. Thank you, Councillor Steck. Finance team got some work for us. Councillor Steele.
Mine's regarding the tree arbour guy. So it might not have anything to do with this, but it's going to be a comment. But it's about the street tree maintenance, and I have raised it a couple of times, and I've also been asked by some residents and ratepayers that can we make it pretty? that once upon a time we had it, so they'd cut them in a nice round bit. That seems to have dropped off. Does that mean that's dropped off of, because I think if we have pride in our street, we have pride in our neighbourhood, we have pride in our city. So I know it's ridiculous.
Acting CEO, this is kind of your area, so you might want to have a go at this one.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, we could go that way. I'd have to look at the scope of works for the tender we currently have with them. But should it not be in there and we do a variation, it would be at an additional cost, but we could put it in the tender going forward for those works.
Councillor Turner.
Page 76 in the schedules account. Can I please find out what the legal fees of $13,035 are for, please?
Sure. Any other questions? Did you have an answer for that, Acting CEO? No? Take on notice.
Through you, Mr Mayor, no, I'll take that one on notice, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions on 10.3.1? Thank you. 10.3.2. Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just noticed that in the operating income chart we've dropped below, and it's noted the variances. There was some variance in unfavourable rule due mainly to funds not yet received from grants. Are we expecting those funds to, those grant funding still to come through?
Acting CEO, is this the operating income on page 128 you're referring to, Councillor Andrew?
Yes.
Up a little bit further. Minute taker. Next one. Acting CEO, you have an answer for that or take on notice?
Through you, Mr Mayor, yeah, I'll take that one on notice at this point in time.
Thank you. Other questions on 10.3.2? And apologies, councillors, for coughing. All good, thank you. 10.3.3. Superannuation, Councillor Steck.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I know that, I note in the minutes that there has been a briefing, however, on the 25th of March. However, I'm wondering why the consideration is not from the 1st of February as per legislation. And I will, first question. Second question, as in relation to, even though members are not considered employees, it also states there that for the purposes of calculating superannuation, they are considered as employees. So again, why wouldn't include the back pay? Why are we going the 1st of July instead of the 1st of February? And why is point 2 option written, sir?
Sure, Councillor Steck. So we'd have to get some advice on whether you could back pay, I guess, Acting CEO, if you're aware. If not, otherwise we can take that on notice.
Through you, Mr Mayor, reading the council agenda item, the provision was as of the 1st of February 2025 for council members as of the 19th of October or prior, so which would be the 1st of July is what we spoke about in the briefing.
Yep.
Mr Mayor, further if I may, just from clarification from the Local Government Department today, there is a memo and a department fact sheet that is available. I'm questioning as to why we haven't received that. I do have a copy that I can share, but as of October 19 of this year, the superannuation will be compulsory in any regard. So again, I ask the question, if it's going compulsory and therefore we were aware of it last year, why wasn't that considered into the budget forecast?
That's up to elected members to decide why this item is here or for next week, and hence where your question around point 2 is in there. I think during the briefing, some elected members have indicated they don't think they should be receiving superannuation, so until such time as it becomes compulsory, they've got that option to if they need to as well. So that's why I assume that's in there, Councillor Steck. Obviously I can ask the CEO why this was presented in this way, but in terms of we could get some advice on whether or not there is the ability to back pay, and that could be a potential amendment for next week, Councillor Steck.
Just one further question in relation to the officer's comments. I'm aware that the briefing took place, but I'm also questioning why in the session it indicates preferences to payments to commence as the 1st of July, when realistically no considerations or decision-making process ought to occur during those sessions. Oh, and so
Yeah,
I'm
and-
questioning again why it's there.
That there wasn't a decision made in that process, councillor Steck, hence why this item's before us, so there can be amendments made to that next week. Again, I would just probably advise to make sure that that's able to be back paid, which I'm not totally sure, which we can find out though, if that is an option, councillor Steck, and that can be put as an amendment. Any other questions on this, councillor Andrew?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Is there currently an allowance in the 24-25 budget for elected members' superannuation contribution?
There wouldn't be, no. Other questions? Thank you. A motion on notice first for the confidential item. So obviously there's some information supplied there. Any questions on this to either the CEO or to councillor Steck perhaps? I just have one, which just normally, for motions on notice previously, we generally have a councillor's motion and a potentially executive recommendation. Is it considerable that the executive support this motion then, if they haven't provided another recommendation, acting CEO? And you might have an answer to that. I'll take that on notice and ask the CEO if you want.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'll direct this through the Acting Director of Sustainability.
Through the Mayor, on reading the agenda item, it looks like it's providing an update on the request from councillor Steck, that it's currently been referred to the city's legal team for advice. We expect to receive that next week.
Okay,
And then can provide some further updates.
right, thank you. And noting, I know councillor Steck has worked with staff to bring this agenda on, so.
Yes, I have indeed, sir. The other question was there needed to be clarification of who actually paid for the McKenzie report? Because I believe that council actually did.
Half and half.
Yeah, half and half. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on this, councillors? Thank you. So, councillors, this brings us to the confidential item, 15.1.1, and I'll just ask the minute taker to turn the stream off. And in normal circumstances, we would ask everyone to leave the meeting. If anyone here isn't part of the delegation who are making deputations, we'll ask you to leave, but I'm pretty sure you guys all are. So.